All right. Hey guys. Welcome to your first audiovisual lecture. Also, on a side note, welcome to my bedroom. I'll probably be recording a lot of these lectures in here. Um, we're going to begin with Unit 1, and we'll start off your learning experience by reviewing why we study history and exactly how the historical record is formed. We'll follow that up with a review of the last unit you should have learned in 6th grade, which is the rise and fall of the Roman Empire. All right, you guys ready? Let's start. Okay, so we're going to start off by talking about the tools of history. Um, Hopefully, this lecture will go over why we study history, the tools that we have that inform our study of history. And this is a good way to kind of springboard with the content for the school year because everything in this lecture is foundational to the things that we're going to be talking about this school year. If you want to follow along, this lecture should be posted on Schoology. Um, all right, let's get started. Before we start anything, we should talk about geography. Geography, you should know this, has a tremendous effect on history. Um, it's going to affect how people live, how people interact with each other and with their environment. It's going to affect the clothes you wear. It's going to affect the things you purchase. Geography has a huge effect, so it's important that you guys have a general grasp of geography in order to learn history effectively. It's no mistake that geography is the first thing that we have to talk about before we even start any sort of learning on history. Geography is a study of Earth's features and how people and other living things interact with Earth's features. It's going to shape where and how people live, just like we said. It's also going to affect important historical events. Let's go over some key geographical terms and features that you should be aware of. Continents. This is a silly review, but we're just going to go through it. 7 large landmasses of the world. They are continents. If you don't know this, you should. They are North and South America, Europe, Asia, Africa, Australia, and Antarctica. And these are huge landforms, but they're not the only kinds of landforms. Any landform is a feature of Earth's land surface. Some examples are mountains, plateaus, valleys, plains. Um, the other feature, obviously, is water. 75% of Earth is covered by water, and bodies of water include oceans, lakes, and rivers. And before we continue, let's just really stress how important water is. Throughout history, you'll see that waterways are extremely, extremely important. They've allowed people throughout history, civilizations throughout history, to move goods and communicate with other regions. Climate and vegetation. Whenever we talk about climate, we're specifically talking about weather patterns. Uh, Weather, you should know this, but let's review it again. Weather is a condition of the atmosphere at a particular place, and here's the kicker, at a particular time. So, climate is weather patterns in a particular place. Climate's obviously going to affect vegetation or plant life. And as you know, or as you should know, climate and vegetation will have great effects on a civilization's way of life. Um, Geography, this whole study can be very, very dense and very, very confusing. So it might be helpful to consider geography in terms of 5 major themes or ideas. An easy way to remember this is PRILM, P-R-I-L-M. And what those stand for are place, the first theme. What is it like in a certain location? What are the landforms? What's the climate? What are the people groups that live there? Region. How is this place that we're studying a part of the larger area that has similar and distinctive characteristics? Human environment interaction. I know that's confusing because that's I, but it stands for human environment interaction. Regardless, this theme addresses how do people change, how do people adapt to the physical world. The fourth theme is location. Where exactly in the world is this place? And for that, we'll discuss absolute location, latitude, longitude. And lastly, the fifth theme, movement. How do people, goods, and ideas move from place to place? Let's quickly talk about map making. The skills and methods people use to make maps are called cartography. We saw cartography as early as Ptolemy, an ancient Greek geographer, and early Muslim scholars. And with any of these ancient maps and modern day maps, there's a fundamental problem because Earth is round. Brilliant, right? The Earth is round, but the problem is maps are flat. So what inevitably happens is parts of the Earth are going to stretch or shrink. That's called distortion. So a solution to that is that cartographers create different kinds of map projections, which are representations of Earth's curved surface, while they try to keep distortion minimal and manageable. And this tries to help control the problem of distortion. Let's quickly go over some map projections so you can kind of see what we're talking about here. Four common projections are the Mercator, Peters, the Good, and the Robinson projections. This slide kind of goes over what each strength is and exactly where you see the distortion in each projection. Um, yeah, I mean, the Mercator, the shape is good. Peters, the size is good. Um, the Goods map, this as well as the Robinsons, they both have good size and good shape, but you'll see from these pictures and also from these descriptions that there are distortions in each of these types of projections. Quickly reviewing map features, hemispheres, latitude, and longitudinal lines. Hemispheres are halves of the Earth, and Earth can be divided into two equal halves. When we talk about the northern and southern hemisphere, there's an imaginary line that divides the Earth into those halves. That's the equator. The imaginary line that divides the Earth into eastern and western halves, that's the prime meridian. Um, and the lines that run parallel to these lines are latitude and longitude lines. Latitude lines are lines that run parallel to the equator, and longitude lines are lines that run parallel to the prime meridian. All right? Three different kinds of maps that you should be aware of: physical, political, and thematic. Physical maps show landforms and bodies of water found in a particular area, and that's it. Just imagine like a Google Earth map representation. You don't see lines, you don't see borders, you don't see city names, nothing. You just see Earth as if you're in space. There are political maps which show features of Earth's surface that humans created. These are maps that you're probably more used to. You see border lines, names of cities, countries, capitals. You see all these features. And lastly, thematic maps, which we'll use a lot of in this course. You see specific types of information overlaid on a map. So maps like population density, or the people groups that live in a region, religions that are represented in a particular area. These are thematic maps, and we'll go over those throughout the year. We get maps from very important technologies. So the maps that we have today are far, far better than the maps that we used to see in ancient history. Three technologies that you should probably be aware of are GPS, GOES, and GIS. GPS stands for Global Positioning System. This is actually a technology that the U.S. military implemented to kind of get accurate information about the battlefield. But we use that today. These are 24 satellites in space. They're called Navstars. And what they do is they send radio signals to Earth, and we receive those signals in receivers. And these receivers display latitude, longitude, altitude, and time. That's a lot of jargon just to say that GPS receivers are able to pinpoint the absolute location, which is very helpful. GOES stands for Geostationary Operational Environmental Satellite. These are weather satellites, so anytime you watch the news or you're online and you look at the weather patterns or some sort of 10-day forecast, those are using the GOES satellites. And lastly, Geographic Information Systems. It's a very powerful technology, a very high-tech tool. What it does is it maps a certain area, and then it overlays information on top of the maps, and it's usually for the purpose of solving some sort of problem. So police officers, for example, they'll use GIS systems to map crime rates in a certain region, and that's just an example of how GIS systems are used. Continuing along, remember the whole idea, the whole main focus of this lecture is to kind of talk about the historical record, why we study history, but also where the historical record gets its information from. So in the remainder of this lecture, we'll talk about archaeology, anthropology, and really the role of historians. All right? Archaeology and anthropology. Let's quickly tease apart what the difference is here. Archaeology informs the historical record because what archaeologists do is they recover and they study physical evidence from the past, especially artifacts, which are man-made objects. Archaeologists do this by excavating or digging through the ground to find buried evidence that were left behind by past civilizations and people groups. These can be fossils, relics, tools, any physical evidence in the historical record that's going to inform what we know about that period of time in history. Also, anthropology is a study of humans and especially human culture, or the way of life shared by a people group. That's what culture is. Anthropology kind of breaks down into two separate focuses. Physical anthro, which is the study of physical traits of humans, and cultural anthro, or the study of human cultures. And lastly, historians, what they do, they study and interpret the past. Okay, and this is where we kind of leapfrog into what we'll be talking about this year. You are about to study history, medieval history to be specific, but you're studying history, the study of past events. By virtue of doing that, you are historians. You are going to be studying and interpreting the past. And studying history involves knowing who was involved in the time period we're studying, what the issues were in the time period that we're studying, why events happened in the way they did in the time period that we're studying, and how the events affected the events that we're focusing on, how they affected what happened afterward. All events will have consequences, and it's important that historians study that as well. Historians, they're going to use different tools and different resources to study history, not just what the archaeologists and the anthropologists are able to uncover, but we also use primary sources, which are documents or artifacts that were created during the time period, secondary sources, which are works produced about a historical event by someone who was not present at that event. Also oral history, which are stories, songs, or other oral traditions passed down from generation to generation. So quickly to recap, what we kind of talked about in this lecture was the tools that historians use, the tools that we use to study history effectively. And it was no mistake that we started this discussion by talking about geography. All right, we need to know and have a firm footing on geography in order to make sense of history. All right, so that's going to inform um, why things happened the way they did in history, why certain people groups interacted with their environment the way they did. Geography is where we got to start. And finally, we close by talking about three specific sources of information, three resources really that inform the historical record: archaeology, anthropology, and the work that historians do. All right, so that kind of concludes this lecture, and we'll immediately springboard from this into our discussion of Rome. All right, thanks.